When my 6-year-old daughter, Kimberly, first saw these sign language I love you messages stitched on the chest of her rag dolls, she said, "Look, Grammy is still saying I love you, even when we can't hear her anymore." These dolls were made by her grandmother, my mother. Kimberly's words inspired this book, The Ragdoll Gift, authored and published by me, a story that took decades to get from its time as an idea to here. But really, the story behind the story began long before Kimberly. In fact, it began long before I was born. It began with this little girl and this rag doll made for her by her grandmother. This is my mother as a child, and although her doll looks like two different dolls, it is just one. It's a topsy-turvy doll. These dolls were made with two heads and two bodies joined where the legs would be, under the big skirt. The story continues with this little girl, me, and my topsy-turvy doll, made by my grandmother. Rag dolls were traditionally made with, well, rags, bits of leftover fabric and stuffed with whatever you had. Braiding a nylon stocking made for a good hairdo. My mom loved the Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls, partly because every Raggedy Ann and Andy carries a message of love stitched on its chest. She made her dolls from new fabric, stuffed with polyfill, and fashioned them with bright red yarn hair. Around the age of 6, each of her 10 grandchildren, the girls and the boys, received a pair of Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls with an embroidered message of love on its chest, all except Kimberly, the youngest grandchild. My mom died before Kimberly received her dolls, and yet, I believe because of love, Kimberly did receive a set of dolls homemade by her grandmother, and this is how. My mother was a lifelong member of the Grange, and because of her oldest granddaughter, who is deaf, she chose to chair the Grange Committee on Deaf Awareness. To raise funds for her work, she sold raffle tickets for a pair of dolls she made with I love you hand sign stitched on the chest. The raffle winner donated those dolls to our local library. The librarian, a friend of my mom's, knew that the grandchildren had cuddled their dolls at the funeral and that those dolls were providing comfort in a time of loss. She gave me the dolls to give to Kimberly, and you already know Kimberly's heartfelt reaction to receiving those dolls. So how do I condense years of family tradition, expressions of love from a grandmother, death, grief, sadness, and joy, all into a children's book? Well, it's messy work, and this is what my book looked like for many years. I took a college class, and that is where the ragdoll gift finally took shape. And satisfied with my work, I enthusiastically submitted it to publishers and sadly received rejection letters from everyone. And yes, I did post them up until one day I realized staring at rejection every day was really not helping me move forward. So I started looking at self-publishing. I wanted a book that would bring a reaction of delight like the one on this child's face, a book with enchanting pictures that would allow grown-ups and children to experience a range of emotions. I got all of that with the services of Bookbridge Press. Through them, I worked with an editor, an art director, an artist, and a book designer. The editor and I began fine-tuning the text, her suggestions in pink and mine in blue. They suggested I work with Valentina Jaskina, an artist who lives in Siberia. That process was exciting and fascinating. Her work began with the pen and ink sketches. I was then asked to consider how my family of 10 cousins would look. I knew the importance of having the artwork as diverse as possible. The actual real-life 10 cousins are all Caucasians, so I looked at the next generation. This diverse group of children accurately represents my mother's great-grandchildren. The artist interpreted my story so well. In the pen and ink sketch, you can see her thought to have our 6-year-old main character be missing a tooth. Great idea, but in the end, it just looked like she had rotten teeth, so we changed it. We also changed Kim and Gran's hands to better reflect the proper sign for I love you and how to paint your hand to make it look like that sign. One of my last decisions was the cover. The book designer suggested the title be Fabric Patchwork Letters, and I loved that idea. I was not thrilled with the first proposed pink cover. It was way too busy and definitely too pink. I made some suggestions, and I'm thrilled with it. I was deeply involved with every aspect of publishing this book. Still, I was not prepared for its reality. At some point in the decades it took me to get this book from an idea to here, I realized I either had to find a way to make it happen or stop wanting it. Now I was holding that book in my hands. Each day I share this story with groups of children and adults. I receive the gift of their stories. I see the wide-eyed wonder and expressions of loss in the faces of the children as they hear, feel, and see Kimberly's joy and sadness, and I get to share that wonder and feel their expressions of love. I've been invited to silly hat parties with I love you cookies, to dance parties and tea parties, to libraries to lead make-your-own ragdoll workshops, and to schools to do literacy work, where we play with my ragdoll Grateful Greta, and we play with a rag ball. If I may leave all of you with one gift from me, it is this. If you have a dream or a passion, don't leave that chair empty. Jump right into the middle of that dream or passion. Put yourself in that chair. Find a way to make it happen. And what of the real-life Kimberly, whose words inspired the Ragdoll gift? She is now grown and has given me the gift of 2 of my 5 grandchildren. These are the 4th generation of children to receive homemade ragdolls from their grandmother. This time around, the grandmother is me, and each of their ragdolls has, stitched on their chest, a silent I love you message to be heard forever.